This is a tale of woe, somewhat self-inflicted. Welcome back, friends. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Thanks, as always, for watching the videos and your kind comments. Go ahead and click that thumbs up button. We need to pay homage to the almighty algorithm. So, I have a story for you today. Sometime it was either 2013 or 2014. My guess it was 2013. Sitting at dinner, and I was flipping through my emails, just clearing out my email box. And I went to delete a message, and I stopped because I thought it was just junk. And I went back and I read it, and it said, I was given your name by a friend of mine who was then the executive director of IndieCog, and we want to write an idiot's guide to bike repair and maintenance, and he suggested that I contact you, and is this something you would be interested in, and if not, could you direct us to someone who might be? And I thought about it for a minute, and I was like, well, that would be kind of cool to write a book. So I sent them an email and I said, yeah, that's something that I would be interested in and I think I could do. And he said, okay, why don't you send us an example of your writing, which I did. And then I also had a blog at the time, I still do. And I sent him a link to the blog and said, here's kind of an example, the example that you asked for, but here's more examples. And he acknowledged that he received all that, and I got a couple other messages from him. We've narrowed it down, and you're in the running, the last 2 or 3 people. And then I just didn't hear anything. And I thought, well, I wasn't chosen. I'd kind of reconciled that this wasn't something that was going to happen. And a day or two later, I got an email or a phone call, I can't remember which, that said, okay, you're the guy. Now, that just on its face, that's pretty exciting. I never asked about money because it wasn't something that I was concerned about. I wanted to do it for the challenge of doing it, and also, being able to give my mom or dad, a book that had my name on it. I wrote that. And as it was, they told me, I had to sign contracts, obviously, and they said, okay, this is how much we're going to pay you. And my first thought was, man, that's a lot of money. Subsequently, I got about 2 weeks into it and thought, this is not enough money. So the plan from the outset was, the pitch, as it were, we want to do a basic bicycle maintenance book that the average person can do without a lot of special tools. And I thought, well, I can do that. I can do that with my eyes closed. And then they said, and it needs to be 300 pages long. And at that point, I thought, how the hell are we going to do that? The things that I had in mind would take up about 5 pages, 10 if you used pictures. But nevertheless, 300 pages long. So I started working on this book. And, you had deadlines, obviously. It had to be, a quarter of it had to be done by this date, half of it had to be done by this date, and then there was a drop-dead date of this. And in retrospect, it would have been a lot less painless had I been a little more organized. But I was trying to plow through this as best I could while also owning and working in a retail business 6 days a week and trying to have, some semblance of a life at home. And it got rough. It got really rough. And, they brought a photographer in, and I think 5 days or nearly 5 days of my writing time was killed taking photos, all the photos that are inside the book, which are very nice. I got toward the end of the deal, right? I mean, the deadline was looming. And at this point, I was, in another place mentally. I remember going to a board meeting and one of the girls looking at me and saying, "Are you all right?" And I was like, no, I'm not. I was under a tremendous amount of stress. And like I said, I think a lot of it was self-inflicted because, one, I didn't use my time as wisely as I could have. And two, the way that these things work in a lot of cases is that they go and they find people that have specific knowledge, but have probably never written a book before. And they're like me. They go, "Man, yeah, I'd really like to do that." And then you get into the actual guts of it, and it becomes a stressful ordeal. So I remember getting an email from one of my editors saying, "Okay, the deadline is like 3 days away. How much of this are you going to have done? Are you?" And I just responded with 3 words: all of it. And I plowed through this thing, and by the day of the deadline, I had written the entire book. Now, what I didn't mention was that the time frame. How much time did they give me to write this? 2 months. 2 months to write a book when you've never written a book before. And when I was in the throes of this mania trying to write, to get this finished, a guy that I know who had some experience, I think what it was, for a time he worked for the publisher. He said, "Well, you know why you're on such a tight deadline?" And I said, "No, I really don't." And he said, "Because they've already got the book sold. They actually sell the book before it's ever written. And they're on a deadline to deliver that book. So that's why you only have 2 months to write this." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." So I finished the book. And I'm reasonably happy. I do feel like at the time I felt like it could have been done a little better had I had a little more time. And then the editing process started. And that's when I lost my mind. Because they're changing your words. And at this point, you've spent so much time doing this that, every one of those words becomes precious to you. Or at least it did to me, again, having no experience. I'm sure that for people that do this all the time, it's not that big a deal. But, yeah, and that just sent me down a deeper, darker hole, the editing process, which I think took longer than actually the writing process. And it was all said and done, and I never wanted to look. I haven't looked inside this book since I finished it. What's the point of all this? You may be asking yourself, and I hope you're still with me. I wrote a blog post a couple days ago. I know at least one of you have read it. Patron David. Hi, David. Who said regarding the blog post that he thought that I needed to go through the things I went through in order to learn the lesson that I learned, and I think he's exactly right. And I think the same holds true for this book. I needed to go through that in order to learn the lesson that I now have learned. Does that make sense? The overarching point is the theme of the blog was about not forcing things, what the Taoists call wu wei. And sometimes you have to force things and you don't really have any choice. I mean, I really needed to force my way through this book because I was on a deadline. And I think what I've learned is it doesn't matter whether you're forcing things willingly or unwillingly. A lot of times the end result is not what it should have been or could have been. I think this book would have ended up a lot better had I not had to force it. Ultimately, there's some things in here that I don't think any other bike maintenance book has included. Things that we would see on a daily or weekly basis at the shop that didn't really require anything but a set of eyeballs. I'll give you one example. I can't count the number of parents that walked into the store saying that their brakes, the rear brake specifically, was locked up and wasn't working. And it's because the bike was dropped on the ground, and when it was picked up, the handlebars got spun around, the cable and housing got spun around, thus putting all kinds of pressure, loading the rear brake cable, and squeezing the brake. It got to the point where a lot of times you wouldn't even speak. They would drag this bike in. I would walk up to him, not say a word, pick up the front end of the bike, spin the handlebars back around, and hand them the bike back. And they would look at me like I was some sort of wizard. So there are some things like that that are in the book that I think were helpful. And that was the whole idea, was to be helpful. So it's been snowing here, or it has snowed here, I think, 8, 9 inches of snow, which in central Indiana is likely to bring things to a screeching halt. So there hasn't been a whole lot going on. I hope you all are well. Thank you for watching. Click the thumbs up button. It does help me a bit. It doesn't cost you a cent. Till next time. Oh, I'm not suggesting at all that you go out and buy this book. But if you do want to check it out, there's a link in the description. You know, it is available on Amazon still, somehow. Until next time, be nice, work hard, ride bikes, play music when you can. I'll talk to you soon.